Welcome to another episode of our Mandatory Mental Liberation series, produced by Baba Jalani Bomani Dembe, founder of Majestic Mind Matters University. I'm your royal narrator, Queen Magical Melanin, for this new episode titled, The Devastating Effects of Linguistic Oppression. Chattel enslavement was a dark period in global history that disproportionately affected melanin-rich people, particularly those of Alkebulan descent, our motherland that is called Africa today. During this time, our ancestors were forcibly stolen from our homes and taken to the Americas to serve enslavers on plantations and in households. This traumatic experience not only stripped the ancestors of their freedom and dignity, but also severely limited their ability to communicate and advocate for themselves. One of the most significant aspects of this oppression was the restriction placed on language. Our enslaved ancestors were prohibited from speaking their native tongues and were instead forced to learn and communicate in English, the language of their oppressors. This linguistic barrier had profound implications for their ability to express themselves, communicate with others, and seek help or support. The English-only policy imposed on our enslaved ancestors was a deliberate tactic employed by the enslavers to maintain control and prevent rebellions or uprisings. By limiting the language spoken by enslaved ancestors, the enslavers could effectively isolate them from each other and hinder any attempts at organizing or resistance. This tactic was not only dehumanizing, but also served to perpetuate the power dynamics of chattel enslavement. Moreover, the inability to speak or understand English placed melanin-rich ancestors at a severe disadvantage in terms of accessing resources and navigating their circumstances. Without proficiency in the dominant language, enslaved individuals were unable to communicate their needs or advocate for themselves, leading to further exploitation and mistreatment. This language barrier reinforced their vulnerability and dependence on the oppressors, perpetuating the cycle of exploitation and abuse. Even after the abolition of chattel enslavement, the unfavorable legacy of linguistic oppression continues to impact our melanin-rich people to this day. The institutionalized racism and discrimination that persist in society have resulted in unequal access to education and resources for many individuals, particularly those from marginalized communities. As a result, many melanin-rich people may still only know and understand English, further limiting our opportunities and perpetuating our vulnerability. The ongoing effects of linguistic oppression can be seen in various aspects of society, including education, employment, and access to social services. For those of us who only know and understand English, navigating these systems is challenging and intimidating, leading to further marginalization and exclusion. Without proficiency in multiple languages, melanin-rich people may struggle to advocate for themselves, communicate with others, or access vital resources and assistance. The vulnerability of melanin-rich people during chattel enslavement and the ongoing impact of linguistic oppression on their lives highlight the deep-rooted, unfavorable legacy of racism and discrimination in society. The forced adoption of English as the dominant language has had lasting consequences for individuals from marginalized communities, limiting their ability to communicate, advocate for themselves, and access resources. To address these issues, it is essential to dismantle systems of oppression and support our linguistic and cultural diversity, empowering us to assert our rights and reclaim our agency. Our melanin-rich people have historically been vulnerable during the period of chattel enslavement and continue to be vulnerable to this day due to the systemic effects of colonization. One of the ways in which this vulnerability is perpetuated is through the limited access to education and knowledge of only one language, which is often a foreign one such as English. This lack of linguistic diversity not only serves to marginalize us, but also perpetuates harmful stereotypes and biases. During chattel enslavement, our ancestors were stripped of their native languages and forced to communicate in the language of their oppressors. This not only served to further dehumanize the ancestors, but also limited the ability to communicate effectively and advocate for themselves. Without the ability to express themselves in their native tongue, many enslaved individuals were left vulnerable to exploitation and abuse. Even after the abolition of chattel enslavement, the unfavorable legacy of linguistic oppression continues to impact melanin-rich individuals today. English has become the dominant language in many countries, and individuals who do not speak English fluently are often marginalized and discriminated against. This lack of linguistic diversity not only limits individuals' educational and economic opportunities, but also perpetuates harmful stereotypes about intelligence and capability. One of the ways in which this vulnerability manifests is through the perception of melanin-rich individuals as dumb or lacking intelligence due to their limited knowledge of English. This stereotype is deeply ingrained in society and serves to further marginalize individuals who do not speak English fluently. This perception not only undermines the value and contributions of melanin-rich individuals, but also perpetuates harmful biases and discrimination. Furthermore, the limited access to education and resources in languages other than English perpetuates a cycle of disadvantage for melanin-rich individuals. Without the ability to access information and resources in our native languages, individuals are left at a significant disadvantage in terms of educational and economic opportunities. This lack of linguistic diversity not only limits our ability to fully participate in society, but also perpetuates harmful inequalities and disparities. In order to address this vulnerability and combat the harmful effects of linguistic oppression, it is essential to prioritize linguistic diversity and provide individuals with the resources and support they need to thrive. This includes investing in education programs that promote multilingualism and language diversity, as well as creating more inclusive learning environments that value and celebrate different languages and cultures. Ultimately, the vulnerability of melanin-rich individuals due to their limited knowledge of English is a symptom of broader systemic inequalities and biases. By addressing these root causes and prioritizing linguistic diversity and inclusion, we can work towards creating a more equitable and just society for all individuals, regardless of their linguistic background. It is essential that we recognize the harmful effects of linguistic oppression and work towards creating a more equitable society for us as well, regardless of our linguistic background. Chattel enslavement, often referred to as the transatlantic slave trade, was a dark period in global history that had a profound impact on our people of melanin-rich descent, particularly those from the continent of Alkebulan, known today as Africa. This horrific practice involved the forced capture, transportation, and sale of millions of Africans to work as slaves in the Americas. The trauma inflicted upon these individuals cannot be overstated, as we were stripped of our freedom, dignity, and humanity, and subjected to unimaginable atrocities. The transatlantic enslavers' trade not only devastated the lives of those who were enslaved, but it also had a long-lasting impact on generations to come. Our families were torn apart, our culture was almost totally destroyed, and our melanin-rich communities were decimated. Our enslaved ancestors were treated as property, mere chattel to be bought, sold, and exploited for the profit and convenience of the enslavers. They were forced to labor in brutal conditions on plantations and in households, enduring physical and emotional abuse on a daily basis. One of the most insidious aspects of chattel enslavement was the systematic suppression of the enslaved individual's ability to communicate and advocate for themselves. Many were forbidden from speaking our native languages or practicing our cultural traditions. They were given European names and forced to adopt the customs and beliefs of their oppressors. This deliberate erasure of their identity and heritage served to further dehumanize and disempower them, making it even more difficult for them to resist their enslavement. Throughout history, the exploitation and oppression of our melanin-rich people by European colonizers has been well documented. One particularly insidious aspect of this subjugation was the erasure of our identities and heritage through the imposition of European names and customs. This deliberate erasure served to further dehumanize and disempower us, making it even more difficult for us to resist enslavement. The act of renaming enslaved individuals was a common practice among European colonizers. By assigning them European names, colonizers sought to strip us of our cultural and ancestral connections, effectively erasing our identities and histories. This act of cultural erasure served to dehumanize melanin-rich individuals, reducing us to mere commodities to be bought and sold. Furthermore, the imposition of European customs and beliefs on melanin-rich individuals served to further alienate us from our roots. By forcing us to adopt the customs and beliefs of the oppressors, colonizers sought to undermine our sense of self and community. This erasure of our cultural heritage made it difficult for us to maintain a sense of identity and belonging, further disempowering us in the face of the enslavers. The erasure of our heritage was a deliberate tactic employed by European colonizers to maintain control over us. By eradicating our sense of self and severing our ties to cultural heritage, colonizers sought to disempower us and make it easier to subjugate us. This erasure of identity served to reinforce the notion of the ancestors as inferior and less than human, making it easier for colonizers to justify their enslavement. The impact of this erasure of identity and heritage on the ancestors cannot be overstated. By depriving us of our cultural connections and forcing us to adopt the customs and beliefs of the oppressors, colonizers sought to diminish our sense of self-worth and agency. This deliberate act of erasure served to further disempower us, making it even more difficult for us to resist enslavement and assert our humanity. Despite the efforts of colonizers to erase our identities and heritage, we have persevered and reclaimed our cultural heritage. Through acts of resistance and resilience, we have sought to reclaim our identities and assert our agency in the face of centuries of oppression. By reconnecting with our ancestral roots and embracing our cultural heritage, we have been able to reclaim a sense of self and community that was once denied to us. The erasure of our heritage by European colonizers was a deliberate act of dehumanization and disempowerment. By forcing us to adopt European names and customs, colonizers sought to strip us of our cultural connections to render us powerless. Despite these efforts, we have persevered and reclaimed our identities, asserting our humanity and resilience in the face of centuries of oppression. The legacy of this erasure continues to impact our melanin-rich culture communities today, highlighting the enduring impact of colonization on our identity and heritage. Despite these oppressive conditions, our enslaved ancestors showed remarkable resilience and resistance. We found ways to preserve our cultural practices and pass down our traditions to future generations. Through music, storytelling, dance, and other forms of expression, we were able to maintain a sense of community and connection to our roots. We also fought back against the enslavers through acts of defiance, sabotage, and rebellion, challenging the system that sought to dehumanize and exploit us. The unfavorable legacy of chattel enslavement continues to impact us around the world today. The trauma inflicted upon our ancestors has been passed down through generations, manifesting in intergenerational trauma, systemic inequality, and racial discrimination. The effects of this dark period in global history are still felt in the economic, social, and political disparities that exist between melanin-rich communities and our counterparts. It is crucial that we acknowledge and confront this painful history and work towards healing and justice for us as well, and those affected by chattel enslavement. We must remember the resilience and strength of our ancestors and honor their legacy by continuing to fight for equality, justice, and liberation for our people. By educating ourselves and our melanin-rich culture communities about the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade, we can ensure that this dark chapter in global history is never forgotten and that the voices of those who suffered are heard and respected. In conclusion, chattel enslavement was a dark period in global history that disproportionately affected melanin-rich people, particularly those of Alkebulan descent. The trauma and dehumanization inflicted upon the ancestors continue to impact us today, but we must strive to honor their resilience and resistance by advocating for justice, equality, and empowerment for us. Through education, awareness, and solidarity, we will continually work towards healing the wounds of the past and creating a more just and equitable future for us as well. I'm your Royal Queen Magical Melanin. We trust that you have expanded your understanding through the insights shared by Baba Jalani Bomani Dembe, founder of Majestic Mind Matters University, in our Mandatory Mental Liberation Series message titled, The Devastating Effects of Linguistic Oppression. Remember this, it is essential to honor the ancestors. We have a unique connection to the ancestors. They endured many unwarranted struggles, preserved our melanin-rich culture, and passed down invaluable wisdom through many generations. By honoring the ancestors, we pay honorable tribute to our roots and draw great strength and much-needed inspiration from the unwavering resilience and royal legacy that has paved the way for our present and future generations. Ancestral reverence is a powerful way for us to continually uphold our own melanin-rich identity, heritage, and cultural legacy. Here is an ancient Alkebulan proverb to keep in mind. If you think you are too small to make a difference, you have not spent the night with a mosquito. Remember this as well, whenever you are in the presence of anyone, saying, "They don't see color," it actually means, "They don't see you." As a member of our melanin-rich culture, you must strive for knowledge of self for greater personal awareness. Always treat yourself kindly and seek to live a totally awesome and gloriously fulfilling melanin-rich culture life. So, like, subscribe, and share this very special melanin-rich culture link with everyone that you care about and that really cares about you and all of yours as well, and thank you for listening.